Mr. Pinkham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Jaime Pinkham. I'm the Executive Director of the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, CRITFIC for short. And thank you for this opportunity to talk about the Interior Spending Bill as it relates to CRITFIC and our member treaty tribes, Yakima, Umatilla, Warm Springs, and Nez Perce. And also thank you for assembling this panel of my colleagues from the treaty commissions across the U.S. We have a long history of teamwork working within the Congress and the administration. Well, our four CRITFIC treaty tribes are fisheries managers across an area the size of Georgia. And we're noted for our grit and for our expertise, collaborating with other tribes with 15 federal agencies across 5 states and 3 time zones, and also collaborating with public and private interests in the Columbia River Basin. And our goal is to halt the decline of salmon and other species. And these species are important for us for ceremonial, subsistence, and commercial uses, and all harvests that were agreed to when we co-signed the treaties. And we align our work consistent with the treaties and with court orders and intergovernmental agreements, and as you heard from the earlier panel, international salmon treaties. The Rights Protection Implementation Funds, RPI, has allowed us to get into the rivers to do this work, to build partnerships, to resolve disputes and differences, and back our decisions with scientific rigor. And we've also been able to use RPI to leverage it to gain other public and nonprofit funds. And as you heard, some of the salmon stocks out west are certainly in distress, but I think we cannot overlook the tribal management that has been helping make a turnabout with some of the species recovery. And then one only has to look at the Snake River coho, a species that one of our member tribes rebuilt from extinction. And these Columbia Basin stocks support, and you heard this from the earlier panel, a fisheries economy from Idaho to southeast Alaska. That's pretty significant. But also, our Columbia stocks are part of this important food chain for the southern resident killer whales whose population is struggling. And I also want to take this time to thank the last Congress for the passage of a sea lion bill for the Columbia River, and it's another example of the challenges that policymakers and fisheries managers face. And in this particular case, a very narrow site-specific amendment to the Marine Mammal Protection Act. And thank you for doing that, and we started implementation of the Act, and we appreciate the faith that you and the public have placed in us to get that work done. Well, last year we were able to take our RPI funds and reach a new agreement in the Columbia River Fish Management, which assures production and harvest arrangements with the state, and as you heard, to renew chapters in the Pacific Salmon Treaty. But getting an agreement is half the work. Now it's time to implement, so those RPI needs for implementation are extremely important. And believe me, in the Columbia Basin, climate change reveals itself to us daily. And we've been able to use the Climate Resilience Fund to work on strategies to address the warming waters, invasive species, and predation that are presenting challenges to our fisheries. We're also involved with the Columbia River Treaty, and it's a 60-year treaty that's about to expire. And the original treaty focused on flood control and hydropower production, and it was negotiated and developed without tribal interests or really looking at the needs, the natural functions of a river for salmon species. So we worked early within the region to develop a regional recommendation, working with local governments and other interests in the Columbia Basin to develop this regional recommendation as kind of an outcome that we want in a renegotiated treaty. And within that was to provide allowances beyond flood control and hydropower is ecosystem-based functions. Well, unfortunately for us, we were denied a position to be at the negotiating table. So our RPI funds are really becoming more important because we need to use those resources to educate the State Department with scientific, technical, and policy information so they can represent tribal interests as well as species conservation. And on the law enforcement side, we deliver public safety along the Columbia River where it borders Oregon, it forms the border of Oregon and Washington. We face the challenges like other police forces do. And we're spread thin by those river miles, so we need robust support for public safety and justice. And I want to highlight, which we've done before this subcommittee numerous times, is the challenges that we're facing with the 31 federally owned treaty fishing sites on the Columbia River. And these sites were intended to replace those that were flooded by the federal dams. The sites are in distress. Unfortunately, we have a bill in both the House and the Senate to address the issues. But services still need to be provided at the sites for public safety, sanitation, and long-term maintenance. Also, the lack of tribal housing on reservations is increasingly making people having to move to these sites and struggle to live there year round. Well, in 3 prior spending bills that you passed, you've asked the Bureau of Indian Affairs to provide a needs assessment of these 31 sites. And you did it again in a 2019 bill, and that report is due about 15 days from now, and we need that report. It's long overdue, so I encourage you to request that report move along, especially with the legislation before us. And so, Madam Chair, we put our RPI funds to good work, benefiting tribal and non-tribal, and thank you for this opportunity to testify before you.
Thank you very much.